You can tell that I'm only 100 years old, can't you? Thank you very much for that introduction. My name is Seb Kindersley. I'm a Liberal Democrat candidate for South Cambridgeshire, and it's very nice to see you here, and it's very nice to see so many of you here. I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself, and I am then going to pass on obviously to the others. And if you have any questions, obviously I'll be delighted to hear them either tonight or get in touch with me. My slightly inaccurately spelled leaflets are all over the internet, as are a considerable amount of comment about those typos, for which I apologise. So, I was born in Scotland, as I say, about 100 years ago, and moved to Ireland when I was 2, which is where I grew up. When I was 16, I decided that Ireland in the 80s was not great, and so I left, and I left school, I left home, and I left Ireland, all in the space of 3 days. My mother handed me £50 and said, I'll see you in a month, and I moved to London, where I proceeded to have a very nice time for about 3 years. But then I came to Cambridge, and then I came to live in this area, and I've been here ever since. I am a businessman. I run my own business, dealing with competitor analysis for banks and building societies, and over the years I've had other businesses both here in Australia and the US, and so I've worked all my life, to a greater or lesser degree, very hard. I'm also a local councillor. I was first elected to South Cambridge District Council in 1999. I represent villages to the west, bordering on the Bedfordshire border, and I'm sure some of you have been there, but probably not very many. And I'm also on the county council, and I represent more villages there, and some of them are closer to you. One of them is Hastings, which is part of the Trumpington Park Ride is in Hastings, so I'm not too far away. My chief interest in being a candidate for Parliament, the second time I've done it, I did it last time round, I came second, quite a good second, but you only have to win by 1 vote, don't you? And the reason I'm interested in being a MP for South Cambridgeshire is because of this. We face in South Cambs the most amazing pressures from the enormous and spectacular success of the Cambridge sub-region, which the university and Anglia Ruskin are very largely responsible for. With that attractive place comes these amazing pressures on schools, on hospitals, on all the things that you know, and roads. Always roads in the end. And so, having had an MP who was really interested in the national picture, it is now time for an MP who knows South Cambridgeshire, the issues that are faced, the places that are in South Cambridgeshire, the people that are in South Cambridgeshire, and the hopes and fears of those people with this amazing amount of developmental pressure. So, if elected, that is what I will be doing. I will be leading locally to make sure that South Cambs is protected and remains one of the best places to live in the United Kingdom. So, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It's the first time we've had a free roaming microphone, so you could get a bit of rock and roll tonight. But I'm a Green Party candidate, and this is traditionally the part of the evening where, as Sebastian has done, we try and out-South Cambs each other. And at the last Hustings, we had a bit of a South Cambs off, which the others very graciously conceded to me once I had revealed that my forebears had been in South Cambs since the 1700s. So I do have quite a strong South Cambs lineage, and we've farmed in South Cambs for most of that time, and I still farm in South Cambs. I live in Bassingbourne, where I run a small holding, so I'm a small businessman as well. And for me, this election is about the South Cambs, but it's also about the bigger picture. And the bigger picture for me is, and that's why I'm a Green candidate, far more than just talking about what we're going to do in the next Parliament. Green policies are fundamentally different because we come from a different starting point. We come from the starting point that says we've got one planet. That planet is the planet we rely on for our survival, and therefore we must start looking at policy making through the prism of taking care of that planet and managing that planet in a far better way than we're currently doing. So for me, That's the crux which informs a long-term view of politics. It's not just about this next Parliament, it's about 30 years, it's about 40 years, it's about 50 years forward. Because two of the huge issues we're all facing, especially those of you who aren't 100 years old like Sebastian and I, and it's going to be the defining thing that you're going to be facing over your lifetimes. It's climate change and resource depletion. And those two key areas are stitched through Green Party policy. They're fundamental, the DNA of our party. And for me, that's one of the key things, because that's actually why I'm here. I've got a very lovely family in Bassingbourn, a daughter who's 11 and a son who's 13. And I worry about what's going to happen with them. What's happening now is a precursor to much choppier waters. I was going to use the phrase, the last Hustings, we had a wonderful minister, and I was about to swear, and he said, the best thing to say is, be a spot of bother. And so, we will be in a spot of bother, and it related to a conversation I had with my daughter, and I'd been talking to her about resource depletion, oil actually, and explaining to her that we're pretty much at the peak of oil production right now. All the general consensus is that we're heading back down the other way. And she said, well, in 40 years' time now, will there be some oil around? And I said, well, yeah, there'll be oil around, it'll be expensive, it'll be harder to extract. But the real questions are, should we be using it? Should we be extracting it? Because the majority of scientists are now starting to say, actually, we need to keep 80% of fossil fuels in the ground. So that's a hugely different perspective on the sorts of conversations we're having today, because it requires some serious long-term planning. So she said, okay, well, that's great, Dad. And she sort of thought about it, and then she said, well, what about my children? And for me, it was heartbreaking, because what about her children? What about the next generation after you guys? And that's why I'm here. That's why I'm standing for the Green Party.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's nice of you to come. Like my other colleagues here, I'd like to introduce myself to you. I'm UKIP's parliamentary candidate for South Cambridge, and I am a mother and a grandmother, a nurse. I've been a nurse for over 40 years, and I've worked in both the private sector and the NHS sector, so I'm pretty au fait with nursing of all aspects. Latterly, I was manager of the nursing home for the elderly. I joined UKIP approximately 7 years ago. I was initially a Conservative. At that time, I was actually a borough councillor and had been a borough councillor for 11 years. Over the years, I have done many things that you would do when you reach my age. I have been a school governor, and I've always been active in the community. But I joined UKIP because I actually was disenchanted of what I saw was happening with the other three political parties. They never seemed to be listening to the British people. In fact, they never weren't listening to anyone. I believe in the British people, so does UKIP. UKIP believes the British people can govern themselves. We don't need to be an extremity of a political union which seems to think one size fits all. That was one of my reasons actually for joining UKIP. And I hope you all have a good evening, and we're here for your questions, which we'll be happy to hear when you wish to give us them. And hopefully those who haven't made their mind up will have done so at the end of this evening. That is who to vote for, of course. Thank you.
Thanks very much for introducing us, Jack. I guess we're all quite elderly, so in case we've forgotten our names, that's really handy. Thank you. Well, good evening, everybody. I'm Heidi Allen, the Conservative candidate for South Cambridgeshire. Have any of you ever had the kind of moment something happens in your life that shakes you out of your comfort zone, that really rocks the foundations of how you thought your life was going to be? Well, that happened to me in 2011. Never in my life did I think I'd be an MP, or that I would want to be an MP. I would actively avoid question time, and I have to say, between you and me, I'm not that keen on it now. But something happened, and it was the Tottenham riots. If you cast your mind back, you might still be able to recollect those images. of people burning and stealing from shops and not really caring for their communities, and certainly not, it seemed, caring for their country. And I just remember watching the news night after night. It could have been Syria, it could have been Libya, it certainly didn't feel like my country. And economically, again, at the time, we were absolutely on our knees. And I'm not saying for one moment that we're through all of it, but I think the light is at the end of the tunnel. So I just remember thinking, I've got to do something. I've got to do something. And to begin with, I didn't know what that was. But the more I thought about it, and putting my glass of wine down helped, I realised that if you want to change things, you can't moan about it, you can't shout at the TV, you do it. So that's where my journey began. So in 2012, I stood to be a district councillor in St Albans, where I was living at the time. And to say my journey has been swift is probably the understatement of the century. Now, I have an awful lot to learn. I'm not a politician. For 19 years, I've been working in industry. I've worked for Royal Mail, I've driven trucks across picket lines, I've worked on the underground, I've worked for a petrol company, and for the last 7 years I've been running my own business, the same one that my parents started in 1978. And we manufacture motorbike paints and things. But I guess the point is, I've worked all my life, I've had a job, I've lost a job, I've employed people and I've had to let people go. And I don't know about you, but when I look at some of the debates in Parliament these days, I actually think, do these people live in the same world as us? When they make decisions, are they really thinking about us? And I'm not convinced. So what kind of MP will I be? Well, I'll be one who listens. I'm very conscious I have a lot to learn, but 2 of these, and 1 of those, use them in proportion, and it seems that MPs don't always do enough of that. And there's an ego associated with being an MP, I know best. And often I find that's not the case at all. I'll be an MP who's very local, accessible, Twitter, email, phone, whatever it is. In this day and age, there is no excuse. I'm tired of hearing people say, oh, I wrote to my MP. And you hear that all over the country. I never got a reply. That has to change. That relationship between people and politics has to change. And I want to be part of the new brigade that comes in and says, you know what? No more. So I'm determined. Slap me with a wet fish if you ever need to remind me where I've come from, but I'll be a person first and a politician second.
Thank you very much. You might not be aware, but we actually have had 4 hustings in a row with Joint Camp Weekend. It doesn't feel like that happened when we did it, it's very quick. So we're back in it again, we've kind of become firm friends. We've heard those speeches a few times, and I apologise you're going to have to hear my speech again. So I'm Dan, I'm standing for Labour. I'm a teacher in Impington, and I don't know if anyone here is trained to be a teacher. I know Homerton's a very prestigious place for training teachers. And I wouldn't really be standing now if it wasn't for what I've seen the last few years, but I'll talk about that in a moment. Firstly, a bit about me really. So I've had a few kind of different careers, if you like, which is probably what most young people are going to do in this day and age, including working in Palestine. I worked in a refugee camp, and my job there was to try to, well, I was volunteering actually, it was to try to help Jewish families get to know Palestinians and to try to break down the barriers between them, despite the physical ones. I also worked in London in a homeless shelter, and that's to do with coordinating the Metropolitan Police and also the NHS services to try to really help people in need. And what I've kind of seen over the last 5 years is that that gap between the really rich and the really poor has grown. And I think that is a fundamental problem in our society. We have to have a fairer society, not an equal society, we're all equal by the fact we're human, but a fair society where everyone can get on, and I don't think that happens. In schools I've seen it as well. I've seen, of course, young people really quite worried about getting jobs, about the fact that 0-hour contracts really hit them hard. And I think that's one thing that I'm proud of, that Labour's going to try and take seriously, to really do something for those people. I've also seen things like the Royal Mail get sold off at half its value, and definitely at too low a cost, and that was just a mistake. We've also seen the Health and Social Care Act, which was brought about by the Tory in this constituency, and I think actually enough's enough. Now, in some ways you're quite lucky. You can actually see that our panel is kind of, we're all new to this, none of us is an MP already, so of course it's a fair chance to ask us any question you wish. But I just want to share with you something from the back of the Labour card, and this is the reason I'm in Labour, and I hope it does kind of resonate with you in some way. The Labour Party is a democratic socialist party. It believes that by the strength of our common endeavour, we achieve more than we achieve alone. And that is at the very heart of my understanding, because I think that's what society needs.